Hello, and welcome to Games That Don't Suck, a gaming retrospective in the Shea Hates Everything podcast family. My name's Kyle. I'll be your host today, and I am, of course, joined by my brother, Shea. Welcome, Shea.
Hell yeah. Thanks for welcoming me to the podcast. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome for welcoming you.
I never welcome you to the other podcast.
You sure don't. Let me explain what it is that we're doing here. So, Games That Don't Suck is a series where we look back at some of gaming's highest highs, unlike another certain Shea Hates Family, Shea Hates Everything podcast family, a podcast. Anyways, that word salad later. Each episode will be progressing through the timeline of video games year by year, arguing about what the top 5 games of each year should be. And today's episode is centered around 1995, which is the year the Sony PlayStation released in North America. Now, if this sounds familiar, it's because last month, midway through the month, we did a little podcast called Games That Suck, centered around 1995, where we talked about some truly abysmal games that released.
Just some absolute garbage. Just dog shit video games.
Yeah. If you haven't listened to that, you should go listen to that.
You should do that.
Because you'll have a greater appreciation for the games that don't suck in 1995 that we're about to talk about. So let's talk about the format that we follow here on the Shea Hates Everything Games That Don't Suck podcast. So Shea and I have scrolled through the Wikipedia page for game releases in 1995, which is no mean feat. And we pick out any games that we've played or have significant knowledge of. Like, we've seen Let's Plays of them, we've listened to a lot of critical talk about them over the years, whatever it is. And picked out the ones that we would like to nominate for the list. So we're going to start by talking about each game on our larger lists. Then we'll kind of cut and argue and eventually, hopefully, agree on what the top 5 games that don't suck of 1995 are.
Yeah. I think we got about a dozen games on our starter list.
Yeah, and that's like, I feel like that's an okay number to cut down to 5.
Oh, totally. Like, that's not every game we played that we like. It's like games that we think are the best of the best from 1995.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we just talked about every game from 95 that we enjoyed, there'd be way too many games, and it's just that's a waste of time.
Yeah, it would be another 5-hour podcast.
Yeah, once we run through games that suck and games that don't suck for every year since 1995, then we'll go back and we'll do games that are okay for every year, and then we'll talk about all the other games that release.
Right, yeah, and then games that we're indifferent on.
Right.
Games that we didn't play.
Right, yeah, that'll be a really intelligent conversation. A bunch of games we didn't play.
It's just us reading a list.
That is real internet media. Like, coming with very strong opinions about something we have literally zero knowledge of.
Oh.
Like, that's like the Twitter podcast, basically.
You just invented a new podcast game for us to do on the flagship podcast. Like, where we have to, like, rant about a game that we've never played or heard of. Oh, that's okay. Anyways,
just based on the Wikipedia page.
Yeah, sticking that in the back pocket. Like, we can't have looked at the Wikipedia page beforehand. We have to pull it up and scan it while we're ranting. Anyways.
Oh, damn, yeah.
Games that don't suck, 1995. I'm going to start us off with a real capital B banger, and that is Star Wars Dark Forces.
Okay.
This game fucking rules. It's a first-person shooter. You play as Kyle Katarn, which, is the best Star Wars character because he has my name.
He is a very good Star Wars character. No longer exists.
Well,
but when he existed, he was a very good Star Wars character.
Yeah, thanks, Disney. I'm suffering Kyle erasure in media.
Right. It's that representation that we keep talking about. You're just not represented. Kyles are not represented in video games.
Yeah. There are some other groups that we belong to, and we're not going to talk about those groups that also suffer from underrepresentation. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, boy.
So, in 1995, this game came out on MS-DOS, Mac, and PlayStation. And it, like, holy shit, is so good. So it's set in the expanded universe, right? Play Kyle Katarn, working for the Rebel Alliance, and you're like going into these Imperial bases and like trying to steal their secrets and stuff. It's a boomer shooter, right? It's a Doom style game with like the 3D environments with the 2D textures pasted on the walls, and then the 2D sprite enemies that rotate as you kind of rotate around them in 3D space. It was one of the first Star Wars games that gave you like a power fantasy of being in the universe, and
right.
It set the gold standard for like what a Star Wars game should be at the time. And maybe we haven't had a whole lot of Star Wars games even since then that meet that standard.
That's not true. There have been tons of awesome Star Wars games.
Yeah, a lot less than we should have and could have had. There've been a lot of
that is accurate.
Total tripe. Like, just really
there's
bad
been
shit.
If the comment is that there have been more bad games than good games in Star Wars, that absolutely could be true. But like, there are some good fucking Star Wars games. That's not to take anything away from Dark Forces. We're not comparing. Right. This isn't an episode of like the best Star Wars games, which actually would be a really fun episode. But yes, I'm with you. Dark Forces rules. I think like in the Doom vein, it scratches that itch, especially like as a kid playing through with that ultra violence, but in the quote unquote family friendly Star Wars lens. Like, it's not demons, you know?
Right.
So that I really liked about it.
I'm reading here on the Wikipedia page, which I didn't realize, but the game's success led to the Star Wars Jedi Knight series.
Correct.
Which I guess I didn't realize. I just never thought about it. Like, oh, Dark Forces did so well that they were able to keep making those kinds of games. And Jedi Knight 2 is incredible.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is where Kyle Katarn, I believe this is where he was introduced into Star Wars canon.
Yes.
And it was not just because of the success of this game, but because of how much people liked that character, that he was the main character in the Jedi Knight games.
Right. So
I think the toughest thing for me about Dark Forces is that, like, when I think about, look, today, I'm all about a Star Wars game that isn't about a Jedi. I love, playing Battlefront, or like things where you're just like a dude as part of this greater war, or like the old 1313 game that was going to be made where you played like a bounty hunter.
Right.
But back in the day, like, it felt like there were a lot more games where you weren't playing as a Jedi that, like, and Kyle Katarn, I mean, he is a Jedi, but this is a first-person shooter.
Right.
Like, it doesn't give you that Jedi experience. And so that was just a little bit, I don't know, it made it a little bit less exciting than what it could have been had he had way more, like, Jedi powers as part of the gameplay.
That's true. That's a fair point. I don't know that I want to hold it against the game necessarily.
No. I don't think that it makes... Like I said, I love this game. It's more just knowing where the character of Kyle Katarn goes in the future. Like, retroactively, it would have been cool to have a little bit more of like a Jedi flair to the gameplay. But because also, this is 1995. It was pretty straightforward.
For sure. Yeah, because like having a first-person lightsaber that just like blocks enemy fire or something could have been cool.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Dude.
Anything else you want to say about Dark Forces before we move on?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I agree. Kyle Katarn is one of the best EU Star Wars characters. He's not the best. Corran Horn is the best EU Star Wars character, or maybe like Mara Jade is
I was going to say Mara Jade.
Kyle Katarn definitely rules. This is a super fun boomer shooter. It hasn't aged well graphically, but that's just part of that era of the early PlayStation. It is funny, like, looking at our short list here. I feel like even though this was when the PS1 launched, I guess it makes sense because most of these games are like Genesis games. But maybe as we get to 96, you'll see more PlayStation games just because it released late in the year. So it's hard to compare. But it's funny because this is one of the... It's not the only PlayStation game on this list, right? No. But it's one of the only PlayStation games on this list. Yeah. And it's cool. Like, again, like, speaking to the, like, brand cachet and how much people love that over time, I think a remake is still, like, in development. I I know that was announced not that long ago.
Yeah,
I think it's still being made.
Well, it's a HD remaster of Dark Forces, I think. So it's like it's like up-resed textures and
so not a remake,
right?
A remaster.
Yeah, and this game's like cutscenes were like poorly frame animated and stuff like that, and I think they have gone in and redrawn some of those cutscenes for the remake.
Oh yeah, because there was a trailer because it's Night Dive Studios. It's the studio that did the recent System Shock remaster.
Yes,
they're the ones that are doing this, which is also very exciting. They did a great job on that.
Yeah, people really like
System Shock.
Yeah, like in terms of an organization coming in and doing a remake where they're not really touching anything, they're kind of leaving it warts and all, but giving it a new presentation value. Sure. I think that's probably the right fit. All right, cool. Dark Forces, frickin' rules. Did you want to take the next one?
Sure. Let's talk about. I mean, we talked about Dark Forces. I feel like that's a pretty heavy hitter on this list, so we might as well jump to another extremely heavy hitter, which is Chrono Trigger.
Oof. Yeah.
Like, I'm just gonna say up front, like, I don't know how Chrono Trigger isn't on our top 5.
Yeah.
It's one of the greatest JRPGs ever made.
Yeah.
Full stop. I mean, the characters, the like time traveling story, which I'm honestly not that much of a fan of generally, but it's executed so well in this game, and it has such fun twists and turns. And again, the characters are so lovable that it like elevates the, even at the time, sort of like trite save the world kind of storyline of this character from nothing and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, what to you about Chrono Trigger makes it stand apart from like other JRPGs, especially in the era or like early PlayStation 1? Because to me, like, I love Final Fantasy 4, I love Final Fantasy 6. Chrono Trigger, I just like more, and I think it's because of the characters.
Yeah, the writing it really stands out, and I think like the character design is really good too. Whereas earlier Final Fantasy, it's a lot of like you're pretty prototypical, like quite literally prototypical fantasy. Yeah. Like they don't really start playing around with character design and like archetypes and stuff until like 5 or 6, I think. And so this is like a great example of someone taking kind of that rough formula, but really doing a lot of work on the writing and the characters, and like not having it be content to just like play on the tropes of previous fiction. Like this is something that is presenting something that's very new and fresh,
right?
Which was really exciting. I like just the art. I think the art, characters, writing, I think those are the things that really stand out to me the most.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and the combat is super fun. It's not, I wouldn't qualify it as being anything that's like significantly different than other games of its ilk. But it's just really well like executed and fun, and it's that good old like active time battle system, and it's just a tried and true combat system. It just doesn't get old. Like it's just fun. Like I don't have a better superlative to say.
Yeah.
Than it's just really fun.
I did like that you, instead of being transported to like a battle space like a Pokemon or early Final Fantasy, like a battle screen or a map, it's just like you're going throughout the world and then you get into a fight in the area in which you were running around.
Oh, sure.
Which is cool.
Yeah, I guess, that definitely differentiate it a little bit from like the Final Fantasy games that were using a similar battle system. That's true. But that's Chrono Trigger. I'm gonna bold Chrono Trigger.
Yeah.
It's gonna be in the top 5.
That feels like a pretty safe move.
Yeah, especially, I mean, we're working with 5 potential games here. There's no way that Chrono Trigger's not making it.
Yeah, I know that's like it. Part of me like wants to rebel and be like, no, this should be an interesting list that's different from everyone else's. But like, there's a fucking reason it's on everyone's list. It's just that good.
Like, it's literally. I mean, I'm not saying that it's going to be number 1. You know, we got a lot to talk through before we get down to like where games go in the top 5. But it's one of the greatest games ever made.
Yeah.
Widely considered, as well as by me. It's one of my favorite games ever made. Yeah. So it's making the list.
Yeah, I definitely do prefer Chrono Trigger to a lot of those early Final Fantasies.
And to Chrono Cross, the sequel.
I never played Chrono Cross, actually.
Yeah, it's good, but it absolutely cannot. It doesn't hold up.
Yeah.
To Chrono Trigger.
Okay.
So what else?
I have Earthbound on here, which is like...
Yeah.
Shit. This came out on the SNES in 95 in North America. I mean, like, for me, like, so this, oh man, Earthbound. If we like the writing and the characters and the art and stuff of Chrono Trigger, how can we not really love all of that in Earthbound? Because it's well, for one, it's much more of a focus, but two, like, it's so different from everything else, and it has like it's a clear identity, and I feel like you could hold up a script from Earthbound and hold up a script from literally any other game, and you would immediately know the style and the tone that it was Earthbound. Like, sure. Separated from the, like, you know what I mean? It's like, it is so unique and individual, which is something that I always really gravitate towards, especially as time goes on. I tend to kind of, I've gotten tired of a lot of the, like, typical game formulas and writing styles and kind of the fads that come and go, but games like Earthbound, and there aren't very many like it, I just think are phenomenal, and maybe because there aren't very many like it. Yeah.
My only challenge with Earthbound is that I have not played it.
Ooh, okay.
I don't say that as like so I can't make it. It's more like you're absolutely right. It's in order to talking about the things we love about Chrono Trigger are very similar to the things that people love about Earthbound. I unfortunately just haven't played Earthbound, so it's one of those where I have to take you at your word and the word of everybody that lauds that game.
Right.
I know that it's had like a weird history in North America, and is the second game too, or is it? What's the lineage of Earthbound? Is it like
so Earthbound was the U.S. release of Mother 2, which is a sequel,
and then
to
Mother 3 has not come out in the U.S. ever, or technically.
That sounds right. That sounds right.
But yeah, I mean, Earthbound makes me think of like 80s sci-fi fantasy stories, and that is it's like cozy, right? Like, yeah, that's the thing that Stranger Things, which very different tone,
sure. Yeah,
but like that was the thing that made Stranger Things so appealing, is we love, even those of us like you and I who like weren't growing up in the 80s. Like, I was born in 88. I didn't grow up in the 80s.
Right.
But like, even those of us that didn't grow up in that era, like, we know what that era felt like.
Yeah.
And Earthbound gives me that feeling about like the way the town and the characters and all that kind of stuff. It's a very cozy, appealing setting.
There's a character named Pooh. I fucking love that.
Put it on the list.
Okay, I am okay putting it on the list. I just like I do, when I talk about the writing and the writing being good, I want to be like a little more specific, because it's that very irreverent. It's kind of at the risk of sounding like pretentious or whatever, it's kind of like a subversion of a lot of the like role-playing tropes of the time.
Sure.
So like,
yeah.
And that's, it goes back to why I said I really like Chrono Trigger, in that it kind of sets itself apart. Earthbound is like very specifically subverting a lot of those tropes, and it made everything that happened very unexpected and new and fresh, and that's why I think I think that's why it has remained in people's kind of brain space and like annals of nostalgia for as long as it has, because anything that kind of breaks the mold like that, I feel like people tend to really look at and appreciate. You know, like for as like you said, cozy. For as cozy as those traditional tropes in gaming can be, it is much more memorable when you're able to break out or like play those tropes against themselves, and be creative in that realm. And so I think Earthbound just does that, has that in spades. So,
well, and just the idea that it, to your point, it follows some, like, narratively, it follows some traditional storytelling, like plot points and like the way that the characters exist in the world,
right?
But it goes like even farther.
Modern day and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
It goes even farther than Chrono Trigger does in like its sense of humor and its tone. Because Chrono Trigger, that was another thing that was appealing about it too. Was like it had more lighthearted moments than a lot of JRPGs did that were super self-serious. But Earthbound, from what I have seen of it, it goes even farther than that in like, being fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about, like, we started this conversation with 3 very strong entries. Yeah. So we'll see how it goes. Earthbound, I think, is like a good potential entry. It becomes difficult given that I haven't played it, and I've played almost every other game that we're going to talk about. But let's go ahead and chat about Yoshi's Island, the weird sequel to Super Mario World, which, we don't get to talk about Super Mario World because we're not going far enough back, but that's like a top 10 game all time for me. So Yoshi's Island is weird. It makes me think a little bit of, like, comparatively to like a Majora's Mask, where like it's a follow-up to one of the greatest games ever made, and it's very different. And so like the reaction to that was extremely strong and still is on either side. Like, a lot of people despise this game because of how different it is to Super Mario World. But I love it. I love Yoshi's Island. I love the cutesiness of it.
Yeah.
Yoshi's obviously just a fantastic character. I think it's a very solid platformer. I don't think it compares at all to the first 4 Super Mario Brothers games. Like,
interesting.
If we're gonna rank Super Mario Brothers, Yoshi's Island is like a distant 5th in terms of those first 5 games. But I do think it's very good.
Interesting. So Yoshi's Island is one of the few Mario games that I actually like.
You have a weird relationship with Mario, especially like the side scrollers.
Yes, yeah. And I think this one, it's because, I mean, when I played it, I was very young. It's like one of the first video games that I played at like a friend's house, because we didn't have a Super Nintendo.
Right.
And I think everything about like the baby Mario riding on Yoshi, who's like this weird dinosaur with a long tongue that can eat and shoot stuff. Like it's so much more whimsical than Mario prior to it ever allowed itself to be. And then Mario after Yoshi's Island kind of retains some of that whimsy. Like, it borrows from Yoshi's Island a little bit in a lot of ways. And so I think the thing that I like the most about it is that it sets kind of the tone for future Mario games to like play with its fiction and have a little more fun. And maybe that was just more of a Nintendo developmental thing, is like they as a company decided to kind of move more in that direction and focus down that path. But for me, like, Yoshi's Island is kind of the signifier for that. Like, just this whimsy fun, like they're playing around with different art styles, and it was one of the most like heavily color saturated games that I had seen in a while.
Yeah,
or
the look of it is fantastic. Like, it makes me think of Charlie Brown, like, in color, like the way that it animates and moves, and it's got that like, colored pencil style, crayon style coloring, where like it looks like everything is hand drawn. It was so unique and still is to this day. Like, that's one of the things that I love the most about this game is the look of it.
Yeah.
And how it like adapts the traditional look of Mario. I mean, Super Mario World, like, that definitely changed the way the characters looked and stuff like that compared to the Mario Brothers games.
Right.
But like, this was on a whole other planet, and just was such an early indication of the creativity that Nintendo could take towards adapting their like well-trodden series and characters into completely new visual mediums. And that's really special, I think. And so many games like Yoshi's Woolly World and like the Kirby's Epic Yarn and even like Super Paper Mario, like so many of those games owe a lot of their DNA to Yoshi's Island, which I think is really cool.
Yes, absolutely. And it's a little it's reductive, so I apologize, but like Yoshi's Island felt like more of a video game than the previous Mario games did, because like there's just more stuff going on. Like there's like more secrets and more hidden stuff and like some kind of light puzzle solving stuff going on too. And it felt like there was more going on, and I could get more out of it.
It was more than just run to the right and jump the way that the other games were. Yeah, that you're definitely right about that. I was never a big secrets collector like in those days, so like all of the like the red coins and all that stuff, that wasn't really a thing that I cared that much about personally. But I see what you're saying.
Sure. Yeah.
What do you think about like the difficulty generally of the game? Because that was a thing. That's the thing I would put in the negative, because to me it was so much easier than the other Mario games.
Yeah, I mean,
wasn't as appealing.
I was 4 years younger than you, so I was pretty young when I played it. I didn't play it in '95. I'm sure I was probably like 5 or 6 when I played it. Eventually, but like at a friend's house, like I said. But and maybe that's part of what I liked about it was a little more accessible to me. I don't know. It has been a very long time since I played it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it makes sense, and I think some of the early Mario games were hard, not in an unfair way, but like the pixel perfect platforming isn't something that I've ever enjoyed. And then that was, I love Super Mario 64 and all those games too, but that was something that kind of translated a little with some difficulty, like that super hardcore platforming that was intrinsic to the Mario series. Not all of that has aged super well, and so this, I think, you just have so much more at your disposal. To your point on like, there's more stuff that you're doing, and also just like all of the power-ups that Yoshi gets, like everything feels so much more powerful than like the Fire Flower does in Mario. So I don't think it's like totally a negative thing. It's just, it's something that felt very different to me compared to the other Mario games.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair to point out. I hadn't really thought about that. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I really love this game, but I know you don't hold it in as high esteem as
I
others.
do really like it. I was just going to say, I absolutely think it stays.
Other game. Okay.
Yeah, no,
Let's
I absolutely think it
stays.
Right? It absolutely stays for now. I don't think it's a bold, but I definitely think it stays for now.
Okay. Let's just hop backwards slightly. Does, in the face of these other three and like kind of looking down the list, does Dark Forces stay?
Yes, I think it does.
Okay.
I see a lot of other games on this list that I really like, but I don't think I like them as much as I do Dark Forces. So yeah, to me, like, unless something definitely isn't gonna make it, there's no sense in cutting it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like there are a handful of games on here that I know are not gonna make it, but are worth talking about. So I definitely think Dark Forces stays.
Okay. Speaking of one of those, Time Crisis.
Good, because I also have not played this game, so I'm glad that you're not gonna like fight for it, because I know very little about Time Crisis.
Yeah, I will fight you harder when Time Crisis 2 comes around, but
great.
The first Time Crisis is great. It is the gold standard for light gun games. Also, this was always the game that 2 is always the game that I gravitated towards in arcades whenever we would go. I wanted to spend all of my time playing Time Crisis, because the idea of like having the gun that has like the slide action and all that other stuff, very, very cool. And then obviously like you could play it at home on the PlayStation, with your light gun at home with the CRT. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to remind people that Time Crisis is awesome.
I'm not a light gun aficionado. I played a handful of light gun games at like Dave and Buster's throughout the years, but I don't know that I've ever played Time Crisis even at the arcade.
Oh.
Like what about Time Crisis was so awesome? Like what about it set it up for the sequel to be so good in your eyes?
I think it because I played several different light gun games, right? I played like the Judge Dredd light gun game. I played the Die Hard trilogy, which had a light gun game in it. There's another one I'm forgetting. But so I played like kind of a slew of light gun games, and we owned a light gun at home, and so I would play those. Something about Time Crisis, I think it's the tone, where it's like it's poorly emulating those like over the top 80s action films.
Okay.
in a way that like it's a little self-aware. But it's just that it's like right on the edge of self-awareness, right? Where like it's kind of fun because you think they know how bad it is, but you're not sure. And if they don't know how bad and stupid they're being, boy, is that entertaining. And so it kind of has like a little bit of that element to it, and then just everything is so over the top and fun, and you know, like they're just like screaming stuff at you the whole time, and it really kind of gets your blood pumping and stuff, especially as like a little kid in the arcade when there's like a bunch of noise, which is probably why they're screaming everything at you, because they know you can't hear in an arcade. But yeah, it's just a good time. Just a good time.
Yeah. I dig it.
But it's not going to stay.
You don't think it's yeah.
No, okay. Not in the face of all the competition. I'm okay getting rid of Time Crisis.
Okay. I'm going to offer up another one that I know it was on your initial list as well, but I don't think it's going to make it, which is Vectorman. Are you going to push for Vectorman?
Yes.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I love Vectorman. Vectorman was like one of my most played games on Genesis, because we didn't have that many games on Genesis for a while, honestly.
That's fair.
Yeah, and I love Vectorman. I also found that game, maybe it was because of age, like I found it to be very frustrating at times.
Yeah, it was tough.
As like, you know, it was a Metroid-like, if you want to call it that. I mean, it was way more straightforward than Metroid, but it was that side-scrolling, very jump and shoot, some platforming. To me, as much as I enjoyed Vectorman, I don't know that it's got like the zhuzh that makes it stand apart in my mind as something like worth being top 5.
Oh man, it's interesting because, you know, I talk about all the colors and everything, like all the saturation, and Vectorman is very much from an art style perspective and like background design and stuff. It's much more gritty. Colors are a little less saturated, and it's like going for kind of like a harder theme. I just really resonated with that. I fucking love Vectorman, dude. I love like this dude that's just made up of a bunch of balls rotating around each other, and he's every time he takes damage he goes ooh, and like
he did look really cool.
Yeah,
it was a really cool character
Vectorman
design.
looks great. And then
yeah.
Dude, remember, okay, you boot up the Sega Genesis with Vectorman in it, and the Sega screen, you can jump around as Vectorman. And like when you land, it just, like the sound design was so good. Every time you would land from like a fall or something, it just has like this crunch. Oh man, the sound design in Vectorman is a freaking plus. And the music was really good, like grungy, gritty stuff. Yeah, I fucking love Vectorman. It was one of the first games that I felt like a real challenge playing, and like a challenge that I wanted to overcome. I don't think I ever actually beat Vectorman.
I know I've never beat Vectorman.
I feel like I've gotten pretty far, but like, yeah, man. And there is always like that aspect where you're right, we didn't have very many games, so of course we would play the games we had over and over and over again. But man, I played Vectorman a lot, and I loved it so much that it didn't matter that I kept losing. I would just keep replaying it. Yeah, Vectorman 2 is not good. I will grant you that. Vectorman 2 is rough.
Sure, yes. I know. I definitely played a fair amount of Vectorman 2 as well. And yes, the first game is for sure better. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not trying to take like an anti-Vectorman stance. It's more of a looking at everything that's here. To me, like, it's not close to being top 5. But if you're passionate about it, we'll continue talking about it later, and we can leave it on for now.
Okay. It would be on my top 5. It would be low on the top 5.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
So maybe keep it on for now, but I am looking at the rest of the list. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Leave it on for now.
Yeah, it can stay. It can stay.
Well, shoot. You brought that up, and then I just talked the whole time.
No, that's what I'm saying. I brought it up as a sacrificial lamb because I don't have that much passion for it, but you did, so that's fine.
But now I have to keep talking. I would like to bring up sacrificial lamb.
Okay.
Hexen Beyond Heretic.
Another game. Like, I've never heard of this game.
You haven't heard of Hexen?
I don't think so. I mean, it does sound familiar, but like I don't know anything about this game.
Oh my god.
Or I should say, I didn't know anything about this game when you put it on the list, and then I looked up the Wikipedia page. So now I know what the game is, but I had never heard of it.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. So I mean, it's got like you choose those you have a few classes. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, you can play as a fighter, a cleric, or a mage, right? So it's like pretty typical character archetype, but like they all play very differently. Hexen has what I thought was really cool were the hub levels in a way that felt like pre Mario 64. Looking at Mario 64, I was like, oh, they did the Hexen hub level thing, which it's totally not that, but I just had this weird chip on my shoulder, like, Hexen did it first. But yeah, there's a hub level you travel back and forth to, and like go to like connected levels and stuff.
So is this the first Souls-like?
Kind of.
Because that's what defines, like, every game. If a game has something that Dark Souls has, it's a Souls-like. And this has, like, hub worlds, which Dark Souls has. So it's a Souls-like. Or is Dark Souls a Hexen-like?
Oh, see, now we're getting into the good shit.
Oh, yeah.
Well, actually, Dark Souls is a... oh, God. I had this game on here, but it turns out it wasn't a 95 game, so I had to get rid of it. What are the... FromSoft made a couple... Kingsfield. Kingsfield is the proto-Souls game. But yeah, okay. So Hexen Beyond Heretic, again, I said it was a sacrificial lamb. It goes in that like phase where I was like into like really gritty dark stuff because I thought it was cool. Sure. And Hexen is very much playing into that trope, but it has like the classic fantasy character archetypes, but like with like.
Yeah, it's got like just in the way the characters. It makes me think of like a Golden Axe. Obviously, it's it's a first person game, whereas Golden Axe is not. But like those very traditional, like gameplay or like classes, basically.
Yeah, because like
fighter, cleric, mage. Like it's very straightforward,
and it's definitely very boomer shootery. Like, I think does it actually use the. Yeah, Hexen uses a modified version of the Doom engine, which it's made by id, so it was their own engine. But
it's interesting that because Raven Software developed and id published, which pretty good pedigree there.
Yeah, for sure, and like that's why. So I think Phil, I forget where he did it. Phil Spencer, I think, at like an Xbox press conference, wore a Hexen shirt, and it just set everyone off. They're like, "You're making a new Hexen." And Phil's like,
Phil Spencer's t-shirts are clickbait.
Yes, yes, absolutely, definitely. But like, Hexen was cool because Doom is very, like, go here, get the card, go here, open the door.
Sure.
And like there are like different Doom levels that have released over time and in subsequent Doom games that are more complicated or whatever. But Hexen had like actual puzzles, I felt like, in them. And it wasn't quite as like the path through levels wasn't quite as linear as regular Doom. But And that's why I just thought Hexen was cool, because it was kind of like an evolution of the formula a little bit, plus that had like the fantasy elements in there. And yeah, I thought it was kind of cool. Which, I guess, Witchfire, the early access game that I was talking about on the flagship podcast, they took Hexen as a pretty serious inspiration in terms of their aesthetic and stuff like that, some of their design stuff.
Yeah.
So
that makes a lot of sense.
It's not going to stay on the list because obviously you had no idea what it was, and I think it's just cool and wanted to gush about it because there's some fun stuff.
That's great.
But yeah, it can go.
Okay, how about a game that has a good shot at it?
Yeah, let's do that.
Twisted Metal.
Yes!
Twisted Metal is going to be in our top 5.
Axel, bro!
There are many great Twisted Metal games and many not great Twisted Metal games.
Not so great.
The first one, to me, is the most special because it's the first one. It blew my, conservative Christian raised mind playing that and just like playing as this evil clown and in all these other cars just destroying each other, and this like heavy metal music playing that I would not have been allowed to listen to otherwise. Like, this was a game that we didn't want to be on the screen when mom or dad came in the room.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It had that kind of thing to it.
Yeah.
But even like that like a nostalgia bait set aside, just the car combat was so fun.
Yeah.
And such a cool, like, new genre of game where it wasn't just racing. Like, you weren't just racing cars. You were fighting with cars. And that was so cool.
Yeah.
I think the
and like I like the globe trotting nature of it too, like going around the world blowing shit up.
Yes,
which
all of the stages
maybe doesn't play so well anymore, but
fair enough. But
was cool.
I mean, yes, it's cartoony enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, all the different types of like power ups and weapons and stuff that you could get. Right. Each car had its own like special things that it could do. It was super fun to experiment and like sort of find your mains and do like Twisted Metal, man. I've got really, really fond memories of that game, and obviously it was phenomenally successful that it launched a whole genre and like a super well regarded television show. That's sarcasm, by the way. Yeah. But yeah, this game fucking slaps. I love Twisted Metal.
Yeah, it was my first exposure to like the idea of the monkey's paw. Because, like, so you could beat the game as the various drivers in their cars,
right? And
like, so you're in a competition to like get a wish granted by Calypso, and like the end. When you beat the game with a car in a very like original Mortal Kombat-y type of way, there's like some like poorly animated, like some like pseudo FMV stuff, final cutscene that is like a narrative thing. So it was also cool that like they layered a little bit of narrative into this just blow 'em up car shooty game. And like all of the stories are like really dark and messed up and
very over the top.
Yeah, it's like Calypso will grant a wish, but it's a very monkey's paw thing where it's like the wish. He grants the wish in a way that makes you wish it hadn't been granted, kind of a thing.
Right.
Which I always thought was fun.
When you said it was your first exposure to, I thought you were going to say first exposure to Rob Zombie, which this was also yes. This was my first exposure to Rob Zombie, which, for better or for worse, mostly worse.
Is it the second one that has Dragula, right? Or is it the first one?
I don't know. You might be right, actually.
Twisted Metal Dragula. I don't know. Which Twisted Metal has Rob Zombie songs? Twisted Metal 4 has Dragula.
Oh, geez.
Wow.
So many Twisted Metal games.
Yeah, Twisted Metal 3 has Super Beast and Meet the Creeper. But yeah, 4 is the one with Dragula.
Yeah, and I would say most of the Twisted Metal games in the early days were good. Yeah. Like, they were a good time, and honestly, it's going to take some research. It's going to take some research on my end, and probably yours, as we continue along the different years to, like, remember what delineates between, like, Twisted Metal 2 and 3 and 4.
Right.
But the first one was a very singular experience of just playing this kind of game that felt like there's no way I'm allowed to actually be playing this.
Right.
And that was very fun.
Yes. I do like the Wikipedia page has the long box cover art. I miss the PlayStation long boxes. Those were cool.
What is that?
The long, and so instead of like the CD case, they were like these big beefy, like almost VHS tape sized boxes. Yeah, I think we had one or two at some point in time. Yeah, the long boxes were cool.
So yeah, Twisted Metal rules.
Yeah,
it's gonna be on the top 5.
Yeah, agreed.
What else here? Okay, let me since we're talking about the car combat games, let me go ahead and do Wipeout because this one's not gonna make it. I love Wipeout. If it was my personal top 5, it might make it, maybe not, but it would be close.
Okay.
But this game, like similar to how Twisted Metal like invented a genre for me of this car combat, Wipeout didn't invent the kind of racing game that it was.
Yeah.
But it brought it brought the elements of like the combat while you're driving with like mines and rockets and stuff as you're racing.
Yeah.
But the bigger thing was the sense of speed that like it was like an F-Zero, but in this more, at the time, very realistic looking graphics. And it felt like you were actually like racing a fucking rocket ship floating on the track. Like it was such a cool experience. It's not going to make the top 5, but I absolutely think Wipeout is a banger. Like this game rules.
Okay. Yeah, I was less of a Wipeout guy and more of a Jet Moto guy.
Okay.
Gotta like grab hook to the pylons, bro.
Yeah.
So I do not have a lot of experience with Wipeout.
Yeah, it's good. Great soundtrack as well. Very like electronica kind of.
Oh sure.
90s vibes to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, really good soundtrack as well.
Okay. Cast it into the fire.
Yeah.
Isildur. Earthworm Jim 2.
Yeah. Yeah. What about Earthworm Jim 2?
I like it more than it deserves to be liked.
Okay.
Yeah. I just, again, as a kid, I was really drawn to like the overly animated, like heavily saturated art style, and I like just the vibe. He's like this. He's the cool worm. The worms were lame. Earthworm Jim was the cool guy.
Hell yeah!
It was just like of the character platformers of that era. I think I just always remember Earthworm Jim.
It's funny to me because obviously gameplay wise it was a little different because you could like shoot stuff.
Yeah,
but the sort of tone and somewhat the aesthetics of it, to me, Earthworm Jim is very similar to Rayman. And you hated Rayman.
I was afraid you were going to make that comparison in Vectorman, but here's what I'll say.
But Vectorman didn't look like Vectorman. Yeah, Vectorman is a more boring aesthetic than either Earthworm or Rayman.
Yeah, I like that kind of like the little bit of an edgier, darker. When I was younger,
Sure.
I think I started to gravitate towards that at a certain point. Like certainly, again, I did not play these when they came out. I was too young. But at a certain point, I really gravitated towards the more like edgy, spunky character platformers, and less of the like just like a creative, nice platformer like a Rayman is. I think I liked the attitude.
That absolutely makes sense, and I definitely agree. I like the character Earthworm Jim more than I would Rayman because of that. He's got the attitude sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's more just the way that the levels look reminds me of Rayman, and because you were talking about that, and like, but you are not wrong. Earthworm feels like a little bit more of a mature is the wrong word, but a little bit more of a mature visual style compared to Rayman. Rayman looked very kiddie,
right?
Because it was brighter, not as saturated. What like you're talking about? Yeah, I really enjoy Earthworm Jim 2. It's not a game that I have a ton of like. It would be on my list of games I liked from 1995 that we'll record in a couple of years. But not a game that I'm like super passionate about.
Yeah, I just have a lot of fondness for the character Earthworm Jim. I have less fondness for the game Earthworm Jim 2. Maybe it's more about the character for me. So I'm totally willing to give that one up, especially in the face of all the other ones.
Yeah.
I knew it was going to spark conversation about the other platformers that I don't like. And so I wanted to articulate, I think, why I gravitate towards this one is that kind of punchiness.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Well, since we already brought it up, let me go ahead and do a couple of honorable mentions here.
Okay.
Since we brought up Rayman, I've got 3 games that are not going to make the top 5 because they were on your list for games that suck. I'm not willing to fight hard enough for any of these to try to overcome your just objectively inaccurate disdain.
Hey, come on, put him up.
Rayman, for one. Again, I really like the visual aesthetic. I definitely agree that it's more of a kiddie take visually, but the bright colors and like going from the traditional Sega Genesis 16-bit visual style where everything looked hyper pixelated and it was oversaturated because like that's all you could do on the system, where like Rayman felt like the backgrounds looked painted, like they looked like actual art and not just pixels, and that was very appealing to me as well. Okay. I really loved the platforming. I liked the looser approach. You know, we talk about Mario, and one of the things you don't like about Mario is the hyper specific platforming, and it just didn't feel as good for you. And this to me was that nice middle ground of it had a lot of difficulty to it, but not because of the actual platform. It's because there's way more stuff going on screen with the types of enemies and the environments that you're in. I really love Rayman, but it ain't gonna make it. Similarly, Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy's Conquest. You seem to actively dislike this game as well, which is absurd.
I just really like that first one, and the second one is nowhere near as good. And it's like, I don't know why people gush over it, because like the first one's just so much better.
I don't disagree that the first one is better, but I like Diddy Kong. Hell, dude, I like Dixie Kong. Dixie Kong's okay.
Oh my god.
But yeah, like because like Donkey Kong, it was goofy, right? But it was also more. It was less whimsical. This game is pretty whimsical in the environments and the enemies and stuff with all the pirate theming and things like that. Like, I don't know. I love Diddy's Conquest. It's not as good as the first game. Hell, it's not as good as Donkey Kong Country 64. Like, there are much better Donkey Kong games out there, but Diddy's Conquest that game's all right. And then finally, Gex, which, much like your love for Earthworm Jim is a lot about the main character, that's how I felt about Gex. Today I would cringe at this character.
Oh, yeah.
But at the time, that's what made it really stand out in terms of like the mascot platformers type. The more 3D games, like as it goes into the PlayStation with the whatever it was, what was the second Gex game? Enter the Gecko.
Yeah,
that game is definitely better. Like that game, I think is actually pretty good. This is again very weird in its environments, but not super inventive in its platforming. That's not something that I would say is like a thing that makes it stand out is its actual gameplay. It was more about the coolness of the character, which, to be fair, I think is better captured in later games than the first one.
Yeah, so. I do think the Gex environment art is like kind of hard to look at, which is why I really don't like the first Gex game.
Yes,
it's just the environment art is pretty god awful.
I agree with you. It's not even by 1995's standards, right. It was not a very good looking game.
Right. Which, like, Earthworm Jim's environment art wasn't, anything to write home about either. I just like looking at the Gex backgrounds, like, makes me uneasy because they look terrible.
Sure.
Okay. I have a couple more on my list, and you have one more on yours, so I'll do one of mine. Or no, I guess I only have one more. We each only have one more.
Let's do it.
Gargoyles.
Yeah.
On the Genesis.
How about, like, no one talks about Gargoyles.
Nobody,
not even the game, but, like, no one talks about the show, even.
Right.
The show was awesome.
The show was incredible. And the game is also, like, kind of really, really good, like, secretly. And I guess I say secretly because, again, people don't talk about it. They are doing an HD remaster of Gargoyles, though.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Everything will have an HD remaster.
I'm okay with it because I like going back to games and having them look the way I remember them looking, not the way they actually looked.
Okay.
But yeah, all right, so the thing that I really like about Gargoyles is the art. I don't remember a lot about how it feels to play, but, like, the characters look really, really close to the way they look in the show, and the animation is so good. I don't know if, like, you've seen gameplay of Gargoyles recently, but, like, in preparation for this podcast, I went back and watched some gameplay. The animation is really good. It's very, very good. Like, better than anything else going on. Like, property 2D platformer. It is definitely the best looking one of those of its time. And yeah, I wanted to bring it up because nobody ever fucking talks about Gargoyles, and I loved Gargoyles.
Yeah, I also have fond memories of this game. I think something that I would criticize it for is I agree with you. I like the character designs. I like the gothic aesthetic. It's like Castlevania, but for kids. And I definitely agree. I'm looking at some, like, GIFs and stuff right now. The animations are amazing. The environments are pretty samey. Like, there's a lot of, it looks like you're just in hell with, like, semi-static lava background kind of thing. That, like, I would dock it some points for.
Sure.
Like, the aesthetic I like, but the actual environment design I think is not that interesting. I also don't have strong memories of the actual, like, combat.
Yeah, I don't remember a whole lot about that side of it either. But
I know, I mean, it was all, like, punching and kicking stuff.
Right.
And I think that you could, like, throw enemies. Like, it was, like, you could grab enemies and throw them and stuff.
Okay,
but I think that was it.
Yeah, I don't remember. I know, like, because you could, like, climb up walls and hang, and, like, the traversal stuff I remember being a lot of fun. I will say, on the Wikipedia page, reception, Scott Larry from GamePro called it one of the best games for the Genesis, right next to Earthworm Jim 2. Let's fucking go! Thank you, Scott. Top-notch gameplay, great graphics. And actually, I didn't realize, so Gargoyles is a Disney property, and the Disney Interactive label, like, their animation division did work on this game, which is probably why it looks so good. Because they're also the ones who did work on Aladdin and the Aladdin and Lion King games. And that's why
those games also looked awesome.
Yes.
Aladdin in particular.
Right.
The animations were so, like, fluid in that game.
I didn't realize that. So this is making a lot of sense as to why like I super gravitated towards that. That makes a lot of sense.
That definitely makes totally. Aladdin was an awesome game.
Yeah.
The Lion King
not so much.
That was one of those bullshit games that made you super hard just to arbitrarily make you have to rent it over and over again.
Yeah.
But yeah, Gargoyles, I think it's great. I really enjoy it.
Unsung hero of the Genesis generation.
Do you think it's gonna last? I mean, we're kind of getting down to it. Do you think it's gonna make it? Let's leave it. Because I've only got one more to talk about, and then we can take stock of what we got left.
Because right now we have 7.
Yeah. So we're getting down to it.
Okay. Your last one.
My last game, X-Men 2 Clone Wars. This one I'm borderline on for how much I want to fight for it. Did you play this game?
I did not.
So the problem with X-Men 2 Clone Wars is that it isn't the arcade game. And the arcade X-Men game is maybe the best X-Men game. And so
we'll see about Insomniac's Wolverine game.
Oh, fair enough. But yeah, just at least of its ilk with like the play as multiple characters, side scroller beat 'em up.
Right.
The arcade game is way up there as a classic.
I do remember really liking that arcade game.
Totally. This game is very similar. You can pick from a handful of different characters. You're fighting dudes. They've all got different sorts of powers and weapons, etc. It's, exactly what you would expect from a pick multiple characters style X-Men game. The story, I thought, for what it is, I thought was fun. Like the bosses were fun. Like the way that they tie things together, I really enjoyed. I guess better than the first game.
Where does this one, if you can recall, where does this game enter your life in the like timeline of you being really into comics and superhero stuff?
I was not a comic book person as a child.
I didn't think so.
Like my exposure to comic book characters was from like the shows and the video games.
Okay. Yeah.
Like I was a huge fan of the animated series of X-Men. That's where I knew the characters from, not from actually reading the comics.
Okay.
And like I got the toys and stuff, but it was because of the TV show.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, now that the more I talk about it, the more I realize like I'm not super interested in fighting for it, mostly because compared to the arcade game, it just doesn't hold up.
Right.
It's better than the first console X-Men game that this was a sequel to. That game was a huge disappointment compared to the arcade game, but this game I think actually does like a lot of cool things and has a bigger roster of characters that you're playing with. But yeah, it's not a game that I would fight for, especially because you don't have a memory of it. So it's not worth trying to push.
Yeah. That arcade game is really good. I think for me,
yes,
my like arcade game side scroller beat 'em up triumvirate is probably Simpsons, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and X-Men.
Sure.
I think those are probably my three favorites.
I agree. Okay, that's everything, I think. Oh, I wrote this down. It's more of in the event that you thought we would talk about this game and we didn't, Tekken 2, Mortal Kombat 3, and Soul Edge, which for the uninitiated was the first Soul Calibur game. All three of those games released in 95, which is crazy that three huge fighting games like that would release.
Yeah.
We don't care about fighting games. Nope. I'm not into fighting games, so they're not going to rate on our personal list, but I did, as I was scrolling through all of the releases, I was like, holy crap, like all three of those came out in 95. That's a lot of really good fighting games, so worth mentioning.
Yeah. All right, so we have it down to 7 right now. Those 7 are Star Wars Dark Forces, Chrono Trigger, Earthbound, Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island, Twisted Metal, Gargoyles, and Vectorman.
This is tough.
Of those 7, I feel like the one that you would want to get rid of the most is probably Vectorman. Is that true?
Yes. I would take Gargoyles over Vectorman. It's close. Here's my thing, all right? Chrono Trigger is making the list. Twisted Metal is making the list.
Yeah.
I think given the other games that are here, to me, Star Wars Dark Forces is making the list. Those are the 3 I am most passionate about. And to me, like, we're picking 2 from the other 4. Is there, amongst the other 4, which would be Earthbound, Yoshi's Island, Gargoyles, Vectorman, are there any in that 4 that you're like, we would be stupid to not include in the top 5?
Yoshi's Island for me.
Okay. I can get behind that. I would say is number 4 because I don't have an affinity for Earthbound. I know when we initially brought it up, like, not that I was against that game, but I wasn't as passionate about it as you, but like talking through it, thinking about how unique it was, how much it informed the weirdness of Nintendo's games, not just within the Mario franchise, but other franchises.
Yeah.
That game's pretty special.
Yeah.
Okay. So Earthbound, Gargoyles, Vectorman. We are picking one of those games.
For number 5.
For the record, I would be okay with Earthbound making it, even though I haven't played it, because you have an impassioned argument for it. I know how people hold that game in high regard. So I'm fine with it being any of the 3. So I'm not like holding it against Earthbound that I haven't played it. Part of that is because I like Gargoyles. I like Vectorman. I'm not super passionate about either of those games.
Sure.
So where are you? How are we? I feel like we can cut either Gargoyles or Vectorman to start, maybe.
I do think it needs... I do think one of those will go. Well, obviously, one of those will go.
Right. But they're the easiest to compare against each other.
Right.
To cut one.
I would rather lose Gargoyles than Vectorman.
Why is that?
I fucking love Vectorman, dude. Oh, man. I think part of it's because I don't remember the gameplay of Gargoyles. I don't really remember how it played. I just remember how good it looked. I loved playing Vectorman.
I think my difficulty with I would rather see Earthworm Jim 2 than Vectorman. Like, if we're comparing like against like, the character of Earthworm Jim is so much more fun. The visual aesthetic, the actual design of the environments and the character. I think Earthworm Jim is a better game than Vectorman is in like every capacity. But you cut Earthworm Jim of your own volition.
Yeah, for me, man, that Sega boot up screen where you can jump around as Vectorman is like a good third of what I love about Vectorman. Just it's got all the sound effects and it's that flashing, crazy looking Sega screen. Oh man. And I think I think started my love of the unique startups for games, like how on GameCube you can hold the Z button and make it a monkey sound. I think my love of things like that started with being able to jump around the Sega logo as Vectorman.
The character does animate pretty cool.
Yeah. Here, all right, Let's pull up a video, Vectorman gameplay, just so I can look at it. I was like, oh man, yeah. And look, when he stands on the edge, he's tottering around like he's gonna fall.
No, I remember that.
Oh man,
literally, it always felt like a glitch.
Yeah, the beginning of this video is him landing on the Sega icon with the crazy wavy Segas in the background, and he goes, oh. When he lands. Oh, God, I love that shit. Oh, and the crazy, the series of, flashing colors and patterns, like a screen, like a color test for a TV as the main menu. Listen to this. This music fucking slaps, bro.
Yeah.
This music is so good.
But, it just, so much of this game felt like... Not that it was unfinished, but it was like bare minimum. Like the collectible stuff, like the whatever it wasn't currency, but the stars that you were picking up, they looked like someone drew them on a napkin.
Oh, you can shoot the CRTs and they rotate around and then they explode. Oh, this game rules. This is number 1 of the year, bro. Fuck Chrono Trigger. Fuck Star Wars. Vectorman.
It definitely is not number 1.
Vectorman. Alright, look. Just watching this right now, Gargoyles, Earthbound, Vectorman, if you're asking me, it's Vectorman as number 5 for me.
Well, then I think we can safely eliminate Earthbound, because
yeah.
I'm obviously not gonna go for it.
Okay. Sorry, Earthbound.
Yeah, it's just tough, because look, man, I don't dislike Vectorman, but like I'm finding myself not wanting it on the list. It's because like the other 4 games are so fucking awesome. Vectorman like is nowhere close to those games to me. And so it makes it hard to like be cool with it being on the list, which is why I brought up Earthworm Jim 2 again, cuz that to me is like the game that maybe we shouldn't have cut. Like we cut too early.
I don't think Earthworm Jim 2 plays very well. That's my memory of it. For me, the love was like of the character and like the attitude and stuff.
I don't think Vectorman plays that well.
Oh. But you get like you get like the different gun types and the shotgun blast one.
Yeah, but it's all really finicky. It has that like it's in between the like 8-point aiming and completely fluid any directional aiming, where it just felt finicky. Like it never felt like I was able to really aim where I wanted to if I wasn't shooting straight ahead. I don't know, because that's the other problem is like I'm not gonna make a fight for Gargoyles because to me the actual gameplay of that game was pretty paint by numbers. It was more about what a cool world and what cool animations. Yeah, I would rather see Vectorman than Gargoyles, I think.
Okay. Well, all right. I'm not in love with Vectorman. I'm not going to fight for Earthworm Jim 2 to be on the top 5. So is there a different one you would like to resurrect and go head to head with Vectorman?
Yeah, I guess there isn't. Honestly, because like from the other games we talked about, which note to ourselves for the future, we shouldn't actually delete games from this list.
Yeah, you're right.
Just cross them out because now I've forgotten some other ones. But like the only other game that I liked, it would be Wipeout. But I don't have the passion for Wipeout that you have for Vectorman. So fuck it, fine. Put Vectorman at 5.
Fuck yes, let's go.
It's at number 6. There isn't a 5. How about that?
No, fuck off. It's 5. Gargoyles.
Fine.
Gargoyles have been struck a mighty blow. What's the shortcut for strike through?
Alt Shift 5.
How do you? Oh God, I'm fucking up the dock. Alt Shift.
You're
5.
doing the whatever Microsoft Word where like you insert an image and it like turns the page upside down. Whatever you're doing is not correct. Yeah, fine.
Oh hell
and
yeah.
Yes, I think Yoshi's Island is a solid number 4.
Yeah.
I'm not.
These top 3.
Chrono Trigger is number 1 with a bullet to me. I don't know if we've talked enough about Chrono Trigger, honestly, to me it's not close. It's a runaway.
Yeah, and maybe that's why we didn't talk about it a lot. It's because we kind of knew it was gonna be the top slot.
Yeah, and like I wasn't trying to end game this by any means, but like just scrolling through the list and I saw Chrono Trigger, I was like, I don't even need to know what other games released.
Yeah,
Chrono Trigger is gonna win.
Yeah, I feel like we did an okay job, like kind of touching on how it is, not in the same way that Earthbound is, but how it is kind of rebelling against some of the previous tropes of this like harder fantasy and being a little more lighthearted and playful with it while still being able to tell a serious story. Like sprinkling in plenty of joviality, plenty of levity and fun with its story, and just having like it's like it's telling a serious story, but it's doing it with a good attitude.
Sure.
And that's
the characters,
that's
man.
easy to get behind, I feel like.
The characters are so memorable.
Yeah.
And just like well designed.
Maybe not as memorable as Pooh, but
fair.
Still very good.
So what do we do with Dark Forces and Twisted Metal? Is there a case to be made for Yoshi's Island to be above Dark Forces or Twisted Metal? Because I'm open to that.
I would almost put Yoshi's Island above Dark Forces.
With Twisted Metal at 2?
Yeah?
Yeah, that's the only, like look, we praise Twisted Metal a ton, and it deserves it. But the only tough thing about Twisted Metal is
you don't remember
how awesome all of them were.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Like, am I just crediting the first game with all 4 of the first games?
Right. That's hard.
Because Dark Forces is a very specific experience. It's not Doom, right? Like Doom is if we did a 1993, which I think is when Doom released, like Doom, it doesn't matter what other games came out in 93, Doom wins. But it's an unfair comparison, but it is a similar game. Like, it's impossible to just ignore that entirely. But Dark Forces is very, very cool. And especially in the early days of Star Wars, just being able to exist in that world in that way. And again, something that's slightly different, like a different type of tone. And the character of Kyle Katarn being introduced. Like, there's a lot of really high highs for Dark Forces. So yeah, I mean, I'm torn. I love Dark Forces and I love Twisted Metal. I love Yoshi's Island less, but like I almost want to celebrate Yoshi's Island more because
we gotta lower Twisted Metal.
Why?
The game takes place almost entirely in Los Angeles. The globe-trotting stuff was in subsequent releases.
Oh, see, yeah,
which is like, that's part of what I really loved about it, was like the big set piece, like the Eiffel Tower stuff. That's part of what I really loved about. So we got to figure out which one that is, and that's probably my favorite of the Twisted Metals.
Yeah, that sucks.
And also, this one also doesn't have Dracula.
Right. Okay. Well, then I would say we put Twisted Metal at 4.
Yeah.
I'm good with that. And then Dark Forces. Oh, you said to put Yoshi's Island above Dark Forces. So you think Yoshi's Island is at 2?
Which, like, I don't sing the praises of Mario games very often.
That is true.
This is like the one that I really care about. Which is maybe crazy to people, but I would be happy with Dark Forces or Yoshi's Island at 2. With the other one being 3. I would be okay with either of those stack-ups. So which one do you feel stronger about?
I mean, I kind of feel the same. And with that in mind, like, I think I would put Yoshi's Island at 2. Just with the context of, this is our list that you and I are agreeing on. And the passion that you have for Yoshi's Island that you don't have for other Mario games, and just how inventive it was. It's like it's a game that I root for, Yeah. Like, that makes me want to put it at 2. Yeah, I feel good about that.
Okay, I do too. As I said, all right.
Is that the list?
I think it's the list. I know you don't feel
that was faster than I thought it would be, man.
Well,
I figured this would be a 2-hour podcast.
You gave up too easily at the number 5 slot, but I'm happy about it, and I'll take my fucking win.
It's because I don't have another one, right? Like, I'm not gonna. I would put, to me, Earthworm Jim 2 is number 5. Like, that's what I would have put at number 5, but you wouldn't support that, which is fine. Wipeout, I would really push for, but you didn't play it, and like, I'm not gonna try to convince you of it. I would rather Vectorman be there, a game that you fucking love, that I liked, than a game like Wipeout, which I really liked, and you didn't even play, right? Like, it's a collaborative list, so you know what? Fucking fine.
I guess, hey, all 5 of these are games that we both played.
That's true. I think it is weird that we don't have Earthbound on this list.
Yeah.
Like, another game that everyone says is one of the greatest games ever made. But I didn't fucking play it, and if you're not going to fight for it, then let's put games on here that we want to be on here, man. Not just because we feel like we should,
Yeah, I mean, like, for me, I think Earthbound is absolutely in a top 10, but top 5... I feel super
We started
good.
with like 13 games.
Yeah.
And 3 of them were games that you didn't like.
That's totally fair.
Diddy's Conquest, Gex, and Rayman.
That's totally fair. So yeah, it definitely would have made a top 10. All right, our top 5 games that don't suck, 1995, coming in on the heels of greatness. Number 5, Vectorman. Number 4, the very first Twisted Metal. Number 3, Star Wars Dark Forces. Number 2, Super Mario World 2. Some symmetry there. Yoshi's Island. And the number 1 slot, the king of 1995 video games, Chrono Trigger. So congratulations to our winners. You all get nothing because the teams who made you are no longer together.
Right, yeah. You came out 30 years ago.
Oof.
No one cares about you anymore.
Except for us. And probably some huge group of people who are mad that Earthbound's not on this list. They care a lot too.
Hey, we got, dude, for nothing else, we got number 1 right. I don't think anyone's going to put up a stink about us saying that Chrono Trigger is the best game that came out in 1995.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Having Yoshi's Island and not Earthbound will definitely trigger some people, but that's what happens.
Yeah.
This is a very, very important, passionate topic, which is what games are the best that came out 30 years ago. It's a very contentious subject. We understand, content warning at the top for you may disagree, God forbid.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of these games are good. I was going to say all of these games are great, but Vectorman's on the list. So all of these games are good.
Suck. All of these games are fantastic, is what I'll say. I feel like I came out ahead on this one, so I'm going to chalk this up.
I would agree
to the
with
win
that.
column for Kyle.
That's fine.
Shea may
keep this in mind. I'm going to cash this in,
but Kyle wins everything. So
I'm going to cash in this goodwill. Like in like 3 years when we're talking about games from 2012. And I'm like, oh, this game, and you hate it. I'm like, Vectorman. Remember Vectorman?
Son of a bitch. No, what my response will actually be, ugh. Right. Hey, if you're listening at home, I hope you had a good time. I had a good time. Shay, did you have a good time?
I did.
Good.
I did.
That's the whole point, is that we have fun and take it as seriously as we can without losing our minds. And I feel like I'm right on the edge. So let's call it there for today. Thanks, everybody. You're all beautiful, lovely people. I say that because I can't see you. And just a quick reminder that next month we have a little bit of an announcement. So games that suck and games that don't suck will be jumping forward in time to the year.
Whoa! It's the Chrono Trigger, time travel story.
Yeah, exactly. We're Chrono Triggering into the future to do 2023 games that suck in December and 2023 games that don't suck, our Game of the Year podcast, in January. So
hell yeah,
we have the clock is ticking, Shay. Make sure you.
I know.
Get some
I got
game
lots
time
of games
in.
to play. Yeah.
So you can look forward to that. And then we'll be back to our regular, we'll doodle-doo Chrono Trigger our way back into the prehistoric period for games that suck 1996 in February and so on and so forth. So,
yeah. Timing worked out really well.
Yeah. It will be off by one next year, I think, is how it'll work out, but We'll I think that'll be probably the plan every year going forward. Will be December, January of that year, and then we'll jump back into the past and work our way forward. I think should work out just fine.
We will all be dead before 2024 Game of the Year happens, so I'm not too worried about it.
I can only hope. Because for the longest time, I just wanted to survive until Kingdom Hearts 3 came out, and we all know how that went. So
that'll be a fun Games That Suck podcast.
Hope is dead, is all I'm saying. Thanks, everyone. Oh, boy. We'll see you at the beginning of next month for the flagship podcast. Hop on over there. It's a great time. It's much longer, and boy, do we get even more stupid. And then see you in a month for the December Games That Suck. Thanks, folks.